Hey everyone, so a couple days back I posted my video of my full clear of Dire level 6 using my free-to-play account, and I wanted to kind of go over the fights a little bit more detail and explain some of my builds, some of my reasoning for the builds, and the actual fights themselves, and kind of analyze what I did and why I did them in order to clear. And again, I mentioned this in the previous video, but I am a day 1 free-to-play player. However, that doesn't really mean much because since I've played the game since its launch, I have a lot of resources and investment. So don't expect any quote-unquote free-to-play level investment, because for Dire level 6 and its difficulty, you need some high investment. So the builds of the characters that you see will be pretty good and may be very similar to other accounts who have spent. So with that, let's just start with the first boss I cleared, which is the Overseer device with the Skirk team. I did actually already make a separate individual video about the Skirk clear, and I go into the details about the builds and the fight already, so I would highly suggest checking that out if you're more interested. I'm just going to go over the fight again, but just a little bit more simplified and a bit more quickly since I've kind of already explained it before. So builds wise, C0R1 is pretty much the baseline minimum investment needed in order to clear Dire Stygian Onslaught. And because I did get lucky getting Skirk's signature weapon, that really motivated me to be like, oh, I can actually clear. There really isn't anything special for Skirk's build. It's just 4-piece finale because my substats are good. For Farina and Escafie, both are golden troop. However, if I did need more damage, I would switch to Tenacity and Demilith on Farina and probably 4-piece scroll on Escafie. But I had enough damage for the clear, so they just kept on golden troop. Now the last slot I did use Charlotte, mainly because I was using Rosaria and the timing didn't work well. Maybe Rosaria would work because of her crit rebuff, but I felt that TTDS and Noblesse would be just as good, if not better. And her being a catalyst was useful in the fight. Now to go over the fight in a bit more detail, the Overseer device is probably the most simple in terms of mechanics because all you need is just cryo and it solves itself. Other than that, it is pretty much just a target dummy. The main thing here is that I, do my setup first to get some energy. Then at the beginning, I do like 4 charged attacks on Skirk while on our on-field to make sure it breaks the boss and make sure apply cryo so it doesn't do his spinning hydro attack. And every time you do this the first time, he actually gives a lot of energy. So then obviously just Q on Farina, then Escafie, pretty much very simple. And then after that, we go onto the Skirk on field. Now, probably the most important part of the Skirk clear is knowing Skirk's optimal combos, or more optimal combos, I should say. And this mainly involves doing dash cancels, especially for her N5, which is her huge slash, which I'll show here. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th normal attack here, there's going to be a big slash, and you can cancel it with either a dash or her special burst. I show it again. See that big slash? You can see that I dash it, and it cancels the animation. I do go over how to do Skirk's animation cancels in a separate video about Skirk's combos and basically how to do dash cancels and some of the more optimal combos that you can learn in order to improve her damage, so I highly suggest checking that video out for more details. But basically, I utilize these dash cancels to get 24 normal attacks every Skirk on field rotation. More specifically, I do tap skill then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 special Q, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dash, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dash, 1, 2 charge attack dash, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dash 1 2, and then that's it, 24 normal attacks. Now you can do the last N2 earlier and then end with an N5, and after doing that, I feel like that's a little bit easier to get your 24 normal attacks. But overall, that is the rotation that I do in this video, and doing more normal attacks on Skirk is important in order to kind of squeeze all of her damage, because the Dire level 6 bosses have a strict time limit and pretty high health pools. But aside from that, everything else is just repeat, do the same thing, do all your support bursts, and do the Skirk on-field rotation, and the boss is pretty much solved, and you just kind of hope that the boss dies. So we can kind of just skip over this. It's just repeating the whole thing. Nothing really too special here. I guess the main last thing to note is that once the boss goes into this phase again where he, oh, not this phase, but like the phase again where he does his little spinny hydro attack and you need to apply cryo onto him, I have the timing good here so that I Charlotte burst here and do some normal attacks first to lower the bar and to ensure that once Skirk goes onto her next on field, her first couple of normal attacks aren't just doing no damage, because the boss has very high res when he is not stopped. So Charlotte being a catalyst here helps with lowering down the gauge and so that Skirk can maximize her damage. And I do the same thing here. It's pretty self-explanatory. Again, nothing special, I kind of repeat the same rotation. Then at the end, just repeat and kill the boss in time. That's pretty much it. Now the next boss that I defeated was the Lava Dragon, and the Lava Dragon to me was probably the most hard and the most difficult and frustrating boss that I've had to defeat in this entire Stygian Onslaught. The minimum requirement for a Raiden hypercarry is C2. I was really influenced and took a lot of inspiration from Jamie's clear, so a big shout out to his video and his clear. Most Raidens have C3, and if you have C3 it is much easier, but C2 is the minimum, but it is very tight, and it is definitely a little bit inconsistent, and you need like perfect timing on combos. So nothing too special about Raiden's build. Now for Sara and Xiangling's builds, on Jamie's video he has them both on 4-piece emblem and damage. However, I don't have that many good stats and I really struggled with energy, so that is the reason why number one I put Amos bow on Sara, just to have a high base attack bow to increase her attack buff, and that's the highest base attack bow that I have. And then I figured that okay, he's building for damage, but I think that most of my damage really relies on Raiden, so I just thought, okay, I'm just gonna have as much buzz on her as possible. So because my team should have a pyro aura from having Xiangling and Chevreuse like apply their pyro to, you know, do the Lava Dragon's mechanic. Once I switch to Sara into Raiden, she will trigger overload with Electro, so 4-piece scroll, even though it's not going to give the 40% because she's not from Notland, it does give 12% damage bonus, so I figured that was good enough. And these pieces are just like full energy recharge, right? Because Sara's energy is pretty high. As for Xiangling and Chevreuse is using the heal set because she heals, so a little bit more buffs there. And again, like I said, I felt like buffs were more important, especially since Xiangling is pyro and the boss pretty much has a lot of pyro res for most of its time other than when it's fully down, so noblesse on her, and this small buff on Chevreuse. I don't think this buff is too impactful, but hey, a buff is a buff. And yes, you need C6 for pretty much everything. I guess you don't really need C6 on Xiangling, but C6 Sara and Chevreuse are pretty much mandatory. So now onto the clear. So the clear was very frustrating to get. I spent so much time on this boss and I had to re-go over Jamie's video to see what I was doing wrong. I was really having a hard time fitting a final Raiden on field with her burst because I just didn't have enough time and the cooldowns weren't aligning. I think the best place to start is actually the end, where you see that I have like 9 seconds left and then have Xiangling's burst, then Sara's burst into Raiden burst, and I get like 2 charged attacks off in 3 seconds, and I barely kill the boss. And that is only possible because I need to ensure that I use Xiangling's burst early, because when I tried doing the boss a lot of times, her burst wasn't up and the timer would be at like 2 seconds, and I need to use the burst because Raiden's burst damage relies on using all of your other characters' bursts. So that is pretty much the catalyst of the start of the fight, because pretty much how fast you start your first rotation at the start of the fight determines how much time you have at the end for your final few seconds of Raiden on fielding. And because of this, it was very frustrating because since we start with 0 energy and Raiden's energy generation is pretty RNG with the particles and her coordinated attack, it was very frustrating because sometimes I would have enough energy and sometimes she just wouldn't have enough energy. I would just have to reset, and I would have to rely on Falcon procs, and that requires a level of RNG. And even if I got all the timings right, if Raiden's burst just doesn't crit enough times, then I just don't have enough damage. So I just have to reset for Fav RNG, particle RNG to make sure that everyone has their burst, and crit RNGs to ensure that I had enough damage. So those 3 reasons are the reason why I was very frustrated with this boss, and it took me the longest time to clear. So to start with the actual clear VOD, of course start with Raiden E, use Xiangling Guoba, so to start generating particles, then try to make sure to proc the Fav so that Sara can get it, then E into need to do a charge attack because Sara doesn't generate energy unless you do that charge attack with the feather. Then I switch to Chevreuse and normal attack a few times, make sure I proc Fav. And then because, like I said before, I needed to use Xiangling's burst early so that it comes up earlier at the end, I will switch to Xiangling's to make sure she catches Chevreuse's particles both from the Fav and her skill. And that will instantly charge her burst, so make sure I instantly use it. And then because Xiangling's Fav is R5, I can proc Fav again and then give the second proc Fav particles to her, and that will have Chevreuse's burst, so she can use it to make sure that the boss's bar goes down. Afterwards, sometimes Sara's burst is up, sometimes it isn't, so luckily this time it was. I do E just in case it doesn't come up, and it works fine. So then E, just Q, then again, luckily this time Raiden's burst is up. Sometimes it just isn't and I just have to reset, but luckily this time her burst is up and I use it at like 145, 144. That is great timing. Sometimes I use it at 142 and just having 3 seconds extra is amazing. Then we go here. I got a crit there, so that's really good. For Raiden's combos, you can actually fit 6 charge attacks, dash in between. It is somewhat tight, and sometimes you just miss it after the 5th one, and then she does a normal charge attack. If I was really missing on damage, then I probably would need to ensure that I get all 6 charge attacks in, but it wasn't too important for me, so if I missed it, it's like whatever. But ideally, I get 6 charge attacks in, so I just scroll back. I think I get 6 charge attacks in the first burst. Just go back. So I see that burst is crit. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I reset the Raiden E here. Oh, sorry, 6. Yeah, 6 charge attacks. Then I reset the Raiden E. Then okay, so here I want to use Xiangling's burst early. Like I said, need to use it as early as possible. So I funnel particles onto Xiangling. No, I don't use it. I don't have a burst here. I don't care about the triple E with Shove vs burst from her C4 yet, so I just funnel particles into Xiangling, get a burst up, and I actually don't use Guoba here. I just go use Shove vs burst because I need to use character's burst for Raiden to do the max damage. The reason I don't care about Shove vs burst into triple E that you've probably seen from other players or Xiangling's Guoba is because if I use those techniques, then the boss's second bar that goes up when you do pyro attacks will fill up earlier, which means he'll get downed earlier. And if he gets downed earlier, then I lose uptime when he's fully down for Raiden's damage. When the boss is fully down, that's when his res is the lowest. So I want to maximize the amount of time that Raiden hits the boss while he is fully downed. So after doing the pyro supports, Sarah E, I have time to do a charge attack there, so I do. Then burst, switch to Raiden, do her on fielding, pretty simple. I get a crit there, so that's good. And as you can see, I am doing her second burst on field and the boss is about to break, right? And that's good because at this stage, the boss has a lot of pyro res, but it doesn't actually have electro res. So Raiden is still doing a lot of damage while the boss is in this phase. Then I kind of repeat again, so go back to Chevres, then the boss will break. So at this phase, the boss has the lowest res, but because I didn't break him like earlier while Raiden was still on her burst combo, then I'll have time for her third burst combo, the next one, to actually have Raiden hit the boss while he's still downed. So again, make sure to use Xiangling's burst first earlier to have its cooldown down faster, EQ on Sara, Raiden burst there, and because the boss is down, this is probably the most damage that the Raiden burst will deal, so I really want to make sure that this crits, so like 395k there, so that's really important. Sometimes if it doesn't crit, I get a little sad. Then I get a lot of time for charge attacks here before it gets back up. So what I myself used to gauge the boss HP, if whether or not I was having a good run or not, is I would check if the boss HP bar would be around at this I from final form. If it was, then I thought it would be a pretty good run and it's probably clearable. And you can see here that I think this was probably one of my best runs. You can see it's already at the F and the boss is still at its kind of down phase, and it's at the end of its down phase, but it's already at the F. So I felt like once I saw that, I was like, okay, this is a really good run. I have a good chance to clear. So yeah, you can see I missed the 6 charge attack there. I got a normal charge attack. So at this point, again, I want to use Xiangling's burst because I wanted to come out at the end. So I use her burst first. And at this point, I want to break the boss as fast as possible because at this phase, the boss has a lot of res for, I believe it's like every single element. So this is where I use the Chevres Q into triple E from her C4, then Sar EQ, then Raiden burst, and at this point the boss has already broken from his first phase and is about to enter his second phase. It will have lowered electro res here, so Raiden will do damage, and I do crit the burst there again. So again, crit RNG is on my side with this run. So then we repeat again. Do the triple E because I do want to break this time. Now, here I make sure to use Xiangling's burst as quick as possible. Now here, this is what I replicated from Jamie. Jamie does not wait for Sara's burst here because I need to have the Raiden burst used again at like 3 seconds left. If I wait for Sara's burst, it will not be up in time. So I just rely on the E buff and then use Raiden's burst. Just ignore Sara's burst. Yes, this burst will do less damage, but it is better to have Raiden do a final burst than to buff this second to last burst. So do the same thing again, just spam charge attacks. And you'll see that the boss is at his almost breaking point there at the end there. And then finally, with like 10 seconds, 12 seconds left, I want to use every support's burst to buff Raiden's final burst. So, yep, make sure Shangling's burst is up. If I didn't use Shangling's burst earlier, this would not be up. Every second counts for this boss. Then Raiden, Sar Q, and then Raiden Q. Now this last burst, I didn't actually crit, so I was kind of sweating here, but I managed to actually get 2 charge attacks off, and that was enough. Barely in time, 120-second clear. And the last boss I cleared was Tulpa, and Tulpa was pretty smooth sailing. However, it did require some pretty, I would say, lucky banner pulls that I got in order for me to reach that damage threshold. Mavuika's build is pretty self-explanatory. I do have her R1, so yes, you kind of need her R1 for enough damage. However, for Setlali, a lot of people use her signature from what I've seen for her clears. However, I used Wandering Evenstar. Now, a lot of people have TTDS. However, you'll see from the rotation where you actually kind of want to freely swap into Setlali just in case you need to kill the mini Tulpa. So if you need to do that, then you might just lose TTDS uptime. So you kind of don't want TTDS because there is a high chance that you won't be able to pass the attack buff onto Mavuika. So I did manage to get Wandering Evenstar R4 because I did want to pull for the 4-star weapons on the Skirk signature banner. For the 4-piece for Setlali, I did choose Instructor. This was mainly influenced by Karen's clear, which I kind of followed. I was considering using Tenacity of the Millilith. Main reason you can't really use Scroll here is because Tulpa is permanently Hydro, so you can't proc a Pyro reaction on Hydro Tulpa using Setlali, so Scroll is kind of useless. However, you'll see from the rotation that Instructor does work pretty well, mainly because you don't really care about Setlali's burst, so you don't really have to care about energy requirements, so Instructors is a great set. For Yansan, yes, you can use 4-piece Scroll, and I'll show you the tech for it. It requires C6 Bennett, but you can activate 4-piece Scroll and buff Pyro for Mavuika if you have C6 Bennett. Lastly, Bennett is on Noblesse. However, you may be wondering why is Bennett on Azurelight, which is Skirk's signature. While pulling for the 4-star weapons, I did get a second copy of Azurelight. Whatever you can say is lucky or unlucky, it happened. I did consider refining it, but I did keep it, and keeping it was one of the reasons why I was able to clear, because I was using Sapwood Blade on Bennett initially, and I maybe could have optimized the run a little bit more, but I felt like I did have a pretty good run and I just didn't have enough damage. So I just thought, okay, well, I think I just need more buffs, and just because Azurelight has 674 base attack, I think that really helped with the amount of damage that I could output with my Mavuika. Of course, the special passive doesn't really matter. It is kind of a scam in my opinion. It definitely increased the team cost. It's a 4 cost instead of potentially 3 costs or 3.5 costs. However, the actual signature weapon that he's using doesn't really matter. I'm only using it for base attack. So if you got the standard weapon like Aquila Favonia or even the Skyward Blade, that would probably be just as good and you can clear. So lastly, moving on to the actual footage, there isn't too much complexity with Hydro Tulpa. Main thing is if you have enough damage and Mavuika's combo. So Mavuika's best combo on the Hydro Tulpa is spamming charge attack into a dash into a normal attack. I did cover Mavuika's best combos on a separate video, so I highly suggest checking that out if you want to learn how to do them. And that was pretty much the main thing that I kind of had to learn for the fight. Other than that, it's just being more comfortable with the fight and the rotations and some of the timings. So first, I start with Mavuika E, funnel those particles on the Bennett, use his E, then switch to Setlali to use her skill, just need the particles. Then switch back to Bennett, and then that Setlali's particles will be enough for Bennett's burst in my situation. So use Bennett's burst, then use E again, so I get more particles for Yansan. Then do E normal attack, which is a little plunge thing, and then you can see that I do a normal attack right here. And this extra normal attack is key because I have C6 Bennett and Yansan used her E, which applied Electro onto the Tulpa, which you'll see here. You can see that right now it has a Hydro and Electro. So by using Yansan's normal attack, which is infused by Pyro because of C6 Bennett, you can see I trigger Vaporize and Overload. And triggering Overload allows Yansan to actually trigger 4-piece Scroll for Mavuika because Overload is a Pyro and Electro reaction. So 4-piece Scroll is active and gives a buff to Pyro. And after that, I kind of wait around for Yansan's burst to come out. So use her burst. Then I use a normal attack on Setlali. Now why do I do that? Is because she has Instructor, and Instructor only activates, I believe, if the character is on field. So I need Setlali to be on field, proc a reaction, and she will with a normal attack because I'll be triggering Freeze. Of course, Freeze doesn't do anything, but it's still triggering a reaction. That will activate 4-piece Instructor and give the EM buff to Mavuika. So you can see Frozen triggered there. Then switch to Mavuika, use her burst, and do the charge attack, dash, normal attack. Now you can see I actually kind of messed up here. Oopsies, I'm a human. Didn't do that correctly. My bad. Didn't really matter, I guess. So then you kind of just repeat the whole thing. I didn't really switch up my rotation, so just use the Bennett E, then swap to Sitlali's skill, then swap back to Bennett. Do the same thing, Yansan E, normal attack to do her little stomping attack, then normal attack, trigger that overload, use her burst, then switch to Sitlali again, normal attack to trigger frozen, then swap to Mavuika. And do that charge attack, dash, normal attack, charge attack, dash, normal attack, charge attack, dash, normal attack, charge attack, dash, normal attack. I actually, if you do count, I do actually miss a normal attack. I do like the 6 charge attack. You can kind of hit 6 of them. I fit the 6 charge attack, but I believe you can fit a 6 normal attack, and I just pressed E. Whoopsies, I miscounted. I guess you could say I missed damage, but you know what? It's fine. So that's pretty much the entire fight, and I just repeat that over and over again. And just a few things to watch out for. Sometimes those little mini Tulpas are annoying, so I constantly like look to make sure they're not too far away and see if I can like kill them if I need to kill them. Then I guess the other main thing is the Hydro Tulpa shield. I guess you could say I got lucky here. The timing just worked out where I'm literally just spending time doing my buffs, doing the same rotation. Then as Mavuika is bursting, his shield is popped. I don't actually rely on the tech of like getting 2 Mavuika bursts to do the shield. I managed to kill it with just 1 burst. You can definitely do that as a strat. I've seen it before. Just for my run, I didn't really need to, so I just do the same on-field rotation, charge attack, dash normal attack, and the shield dies. And I kind of just repeat the whole thing. Now, like I said, the other main mechanic for this boss is to just keep track of those mini Tulpas. So switch to Sitlali, press her skill, kill it. Pretty self-explanatory there. And that's pretty much the entire fight. I just repeat the whole thing again. Not too much to say here. I would say that this is mainly a damage check. If you don't have enough damage to kill the big shield, then you can't win. And he has a lot of HP, so if you don't kill the boss, then you don't win. And the main thing is, of course, keeping track of those Hydro Tulpas, the mini Hydro Tulpas, which Sitlali, like that's why everyone uses Sitlali, right? Otherwise, I just, like I said, do the exact same thing, same combo, and yeah, I don't really stray from that path unless I really need to stay longer on Sitlali if there's a mini Tulpa that I need to kill. So yep, final burst into on-field, charge attack, dash normal attack, and the boss dies. So very nice. So those were all my Stygian Onslaught clears. Overall, yes, there's a lot of things where I find annoying and it can get really frustrating, like 0 energy, the fact that I can't swap builds around, otherwise it like resets it, so I have to make sure that I have all builds for all characters, which is kind of annoying. And of course, this is pretty much designed for your people to pull the on-banner character, because those on-banner characters are the best characters to clear the content. However, despite this, I do enjoy the fact that it is harder content, higher HP pools, and have like some special unique mechanics. It really does push me to really optimize my character builds and optimize my play, which we don't really have that type of content. So it's nice to have that hard end game content for me to really push myself and push my gameplay to the next level. Will I be able to clear the next patch? Maybe, maybe not. We'll just have to see if my characters are able to do it. If I can't, I'm not going to sweat it. It's just a weapon skin that's temporary. It's fine. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed my explanation of the clear, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.